You'd think that a house with lace curtains and a manicured lawn meant something safe lived inside it. But behind the white front door of the Whitmore residence, love had a hierarchy, and Alina was never on the top shelf. She was the firstborn, the careful one, the quiet shadow who cleaned up after her younger brother, Luke, and folded laundry without being asked. At school, she won spelling bees and got straight A's. At home, no one looked up from the dinner table when she walked in. Her mother, Margaret, had a way of offering smiles that never reached her eyes. Her father, Stanley, was a man of few words, most of them reserved for Luke. And Luke? He basked in a kind of golden glow that Alina could never touch. He could spill juice on the carpet or skip his chores, and somehow it would become Alina's fault for not watching her little brother better. Birthdays were the worst. Luke always had balloons, noise, gifts stacked to the ceiling. Alina, store-bought cake and a be grateful speech. She stopped inviting friends after her 10th. It was easier that way. Still, she tried. She tried so hard to earn what should have been freely given. She helped Margaret in the garden, hoping for a thank you. She brought home awards, hoping Stanley would look proud. But their attention was like mist always close, never held. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. The table was set with chipped plates and overcooked pot roast. Luke was whining about his math teacher again, something about unfair grading. Alina, out of habit, tried to help. "Maybe I can show you a shortcut I used last year," she said gently. Margaret froze mid-bite. "Oh, would you stop acting like you know everything?" She snapped. Alina blinked. "I was just trying to. You always act like you're better than us." "Like you don't belong here," Margaret hissed, her fork clinking sharply against the plate. "Honestly, you act like you were adopted." She paused, looked Alina square in the eye. "Maybe you were." The silence that followed wasn't loud, it was final. Like a door slamming shut in the middle of a dream. Stanley didn't say a word. He kept chewing, kept his eyes on his food. Luke smirked. Not cruelly, just casually, as if his mother hadn't just shattered something fragile in the room. Alina didn't respond. She couldn't. She stared down at her peas, her pulse ringing in her ears, and felt the walls of the dining room press inward. Her stomach turned. After dinner, she walked upstairs slowly. Her legs moved on instinct, but her mind stayed frozen in that moment. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling fan. It spun in lazy circles, mocking her stillness. Was she adopted? No, she knew she wasn't. There were baby photos, a birth certificate, but somehow that wasn't the point. It wasn't about facts. It was about how they made her feel. Like a guest. Like an afterthought. Like she didn't belong. She waited for footsteps. For someone to knock on her door. For Margaret to come upstairs and say, "I didn't mean it like that." For Stanley to say, "You're our daughter." That was wrong. No one came in the morning. No one mentioned it. Not over toast. Not in the car. It was as if her pain had been invisible to from that day on. She stopped trying, not all at once, but slowly. She stopped showing them her report cards, stopped asking if they were proud, stopped expecting Luke to treat her like a sister. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, like dust settling on a shelf no one touched, and beneath that quiet, something began to grow. A question. Not, "Why don't they love me?" She'd asked that for too long. Now it was, "If they don't see my value, maybe one day I'll show them what they missed." She didn't know when. She didn't know how. But she knew something had broken, and in that breaking, something stronger had started to form. They didn't just say it once. The adopted girl comment became a kind of family. Folklore, the kind told with smirks and chuckles at Alina's expense. A nickname. A joke. A convenient way to remind her that she didn't quite fit in at first. Alina tried to pretend it didn't sting. When Margaret would laugh and say, "Don't mind her, she's not really one of us," in front of guests, Alina forced a smile and excused herself to the kitchen. When Stanley said things like, "We always wondered if they switched babies at the hospital," she swallowed the egg and looked away. Even Luke got in on it. Double quotes, "Hey, adoptoid," he'd whisper under his breath when she passed him in the hallway. "Maybe your real family's still out there, trying to return you." At family gatherings, the remarks were casual, almost rehearsed. Someone would ask Alina where she got her love of books, and before she could answer, Margaret would jump in. "Must be from her mystery DNA." Cue laughter. No one thought to ask how it felt to be the punchline. It didn't matter how well she did in school or how responsible she was. The label stuck, and worse, it started to echo inside her own head. Maybe I am different. Maybe I don't belong. Maybe I shouldn't try so hard to fit where I'm not wanted. The hardest part wasn't the cruelty. It was the gaslighting. Whenever Alina spoke up, Margaret would sigh and say she was too sensitive, as if the hurt was her fault. "It's just a joke," they'd say. "Can't you take a joke?" And every time Alina tried to explain that jokes shouldn't hurt, they'd twist it back on her, make her feel like she was broken for feeling anything at all. So she stopped speaking up. She learned how to flinch on the inside, how to keep her face still when the jokes flew like darts. She practiced the kind of silence that made her invisible. Because being invisible was safer than being mocked. She started spending more time in the library after school. It was quiet there, and no one called her names. She read novels about girls who didn't belong and found strength anyway. About women who were underestimated but rose anyway. She saw herself in those pages long before she could see herself in her own mirror, and slowly, something began to shift. She stopped correcting Luke when he misquoted history, stopped offering to help Margaret in the kitchen, stopped apologizing when Stanley frowned at her for being too quiet. If they were going to make her the outsider, she'd stop pretending she ever belonged. But inside, something new was forming. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet resistance, a knowing, a seed. She didn't name it at first, but she felt it grow when she let their words roll off her instead of burying into her skin. She felt it every time she chose not to laugh along, every time she walked away instead of engaging. It was subtle, like the first shift of seasons. Not loud, but powerful. Margaret noticed it first. "You've been distant," she said one day over breakfast. Alina stirred her oatmeal without answering. "You're not sulking over that silly joke again, are you?" Alina didn't look up. "Was it a joke?" Margaret scoffed. "You're being dramatic." There it was again. Dramatic, sensitive, overreacting. The words they used like chains, but now Alina understood. They said those things not because she was weak, but because they feared what she might become if she ever stopped believing them. The more they talked, the more she listened. But not to them. To herself. To the voice inside that whispered, "You are not what they say you are." It became a mantra. A quiet rebellion. One day, during a family dinner with distant cousins in town, someone asked Luke what he wanted to study in college. He shrugged, said he didn't know. Alina had just won a statewide academic competition, but no one brought it up. She sat there, silent, letting the roast chicken grow cold on her plate. Then one of the cousins asked, "Alina, what about you?" Before she could answer, Stanley chuckled. "Oh, she's probably off to join her real family somewhere. Harvard, maybe." Everyone laughed, everyone except her. Alina stood up, calm, still. "I'm going to Yale," she said quietly. "Early admission. Double quotes, silence. She picked up her plate and walked to the kitchen. For once, she didn't care what they thought. For once, they didn't know what to say. Later that night, alone in her room, she looked in the mirror and said it out loud. I belonged to me. The seed had sprouted Dot, and it was growing into something they could never joke away. When Alina turned 18, no one asked if she had a plan. No cake. No hugs, no parting words. Just the clink of forks at dinner and the usual silence that filled the spaces where love should have lived. She didn't bother announcing she was leaving. She simply packed a single suitcase, folded her high school diploma into a manila envelope, and slipped out of the house before sunrise. She left a note on the kitchen table, not out of sentiment, but formality. "Thank you. I'll be fine." And she was not immediately. Not easily. But eventually, she learned that fine didn't mean thriving. It just meant surviving without looking back. She moved into a small studio apartment 2 bus rides away from the city college. The wallpaper was peeling, and the water heater rattled at night. But it was hers. No one rolled their eyes when she spoke. No one laughed at her dreams. No one made her feel like a stranger in her own skin. She worked the night shift at a diner, pouring coffee and memorizing names of regulars while studying textbooks between orders. The smell of grease followed her home, clinging to her hair, her clothes. She didn't mind. Every dollar tipped was another dollar away from the people who never believed in her. College wasn't glamorous. She couldn't afford dorm rooms or clubs. She borrowed used books, sat in the front row, and kept to herself. While others partied, she planned. While others leaned on family, she leaned on share every once in a while. A professor would pause after class and say something like, "You've got a mind for analysis," or "You write like someone twice your age." She never knew how to respond. Praise still startled her, like a foreign language she was only beginning to learn. Back home, the family engine kept turning. She heard about it through occasional calls from distant cousins or accidental run-ins at the grocery store. Luke had failed out of community college again. He was trying his hand at a new business idea again. Margaret had posted photos of his grand opening on Facebook, a tiny kiosk in a dying strip mall, selling vape pens and wellness smoothies. "Proud of my boy." The caption read, "No mention of Alina's Dean's List honors." No word of her internship with the state senator. She didn't expect it anymore. Recognition wasn't the goal. Freedom was. The holidays came and went. Thanksgiving, Christmas, even Easter. The invitations never came. She never had to turn them down because they were never offered. At first, the absence stung, but over time, it became relief. Quiet holidays meant peace, books, and cheap takeout. She could eat in pajamas by 24. Alina had finished grad school by 26. She had secured a position as a legislative researcher. Her apartment was now 2 bedrooms, small but bright. Her closet no longer held thrift store coats patched at the elbows. She could afford real furniture, a matching set of dishes. She lit candles that smelled like vanilla and let her body rest in rooms that felt like her No one applauded. But she applauded herself because every step forward was one they'd never see coming. Once, in a moment of fragile nostalgia, she looked through the old family photos she'd tucked away in a drawer. In each picture, Luke was front and center, beaming, clapping, holding trophies. Alina was there too, just blurred in the background, half smiling, always slightly out of focus. Even the lens knew where the love lived. She closed the album and placed it back in the drawer. It didn't hurt the way it used to. It was just proof, a fossil of a life she no longer lived in. Still, she couldn't shake the occasional wonder. Had they noticed her absence? Had they ever thought to call, to write, to ask if she was okay? She knew the answer, but the heart, no matter how healed, sometimes still knocks on old doors. Then came Luke's engagement. She didn't hear it from the family. A friend forwarded her the post. Luke standing beside a girl named Tiffany, holding up a sign that said, "She said yes." Margaret's caption read, My son is becoming a man. We're so blessed. Can't wait for the wedding of the year. Wedding of the year. And no mention of the sister who used to braid his hair before school. Alina stared at the screen, then closed it. She brewed herself a cup of tea. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She simply sat in her favorite chair, sipped slowly, and reminded herself of a simple truth. Their silence was never her fault, Doc. She had been building a life in the background for so long. They didn't even see the foundation being laid. While they laughed at her absence, she was laying bricks made of self-worth, of vision, of grit. Dot. By now, she had everything they said she couldn't have: independence, peace, and a name that held value even if no one in her family spoke it aloud. What they didn't see, and probably never would, was that their rejection had carved space for her to become whole. They gave her silence. She built a life from it. Alina had stopped expecting visitors years ago. Her apartment was quiet, tucked above a flower shop on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The bell over the door rang only for deliveries or the occasional friend from work. So when the knock came on a rainy Sunday afternoon, she hesitated. No one ever showed up unannounced. Dot. She opened the door cautiously, and there stood a woman with weathered eyes and a familiar mouth. Alina? The woman asked, voice low but steady. Alina studied her. Sharp nose, gray-streaked hair pulled into a bun, a coat too thin for the rain. Yes, I'm Rosemary, the woman said. Stanley's sister. Alina blinked. Her father's estranged sister, the one no one ever talked about except in clipped, disapproving tones. The dramatic one, Margaret used to say. I didn't know you knew where I lived, Alina said cautiously. I didn't until last week, Rosemary replied. I was going through some of Stanley's old things. Found something that belongs to you. Alina hesitated for only a second before stepping aside. Come in. They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from 2 cups of chamomile tea. Rain tapped gently against the window. Rosemary didn't make small talk. She reached into her worn purse and pulled out a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with Alina's name written in shaky pen. What is this? Alina asked, her throat suddenly dry. A letter from your father. He never sent it. I found it in a locked box after the funeral. It had your name on it and a note underneath. It said, if she ever wants to know. Alina stared at it. The handwriting was unmistakable. The way the A curved. The loop of the L. It was him. I thought he hated me, she whispered. Rosemary shook her head. He didn't hate you. He just didn't know how to be a father to someone like you. You were too bright, too independent. You made him feel things he didn't understand. Alina said nothing. Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, folded crisply. She unfolded it, heart pounding. Alina, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I don't know if I ever had the courage to say these things aloud, but I owe you the truth. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. You asked for so little and deserved so much more. I didn't know how to love you without feeling like I was failing. Your mother, she didn't make it easy. And I didn't try hard enough, but I saw you. Every report card, every quiet act of kindness, every time you held your tongue when we didn't deserve your silence. I saw all of it. There's something I left behind for you. A legacy. I hope it finds its way to you. It's not just money, it's a recognition. A thank you. A piece of something I should have given you in life. Forgive me if you can. Dad, the room fell silent. Alina stared at the words, her breath shallow. It wasn't an apology wrapped in excuses. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time, she felt seen, even if it came too late. What legacy? She asked, eyes still fixed on the paper. Rosemary shrugged gently. He didn't tell me. But knowing Stanley, it's probably tied up in legal paperwork somewhere. He was sentimental in ways he never admitted. You should talk to his old lawyer. Alina folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table, her fingers resting on it like it might disappear. She looked up at Rosemary. Why bring this to me now? Because you deserve to know you weren't forgotten, Rosemary said. And because it's time someone told you the truth. Your father did love you. He just showed it too late. Alina sat there long after Rosemary left. The tea had gone cold, the rain had stopped, and the silence felt different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. The Whitmore house didn't crumble overnight. It cracked slowly, like porcelain held too tight for too long. Margaret had always taken pride in their home. The velvet curtains, the antique grandfather clock, the china no one was allowed to touch. But pride couldn't pay the property taxes. And sentiment didn't keep the lights on. Luke had moved back in just after his second divorce. 34, jobless and bloated with entitlement, he carried his failures into the house like heirlooms. He told everyone he was between ventures, but truthfully, the last venture, a boutique contracting company, had gone bankrupt the year before. Bad management, worse spending, and a lawsuit or two. The construction business their father once ran had died with him, slowly gutted by incompetence and neglect. Luke wasn't a builder. He liked the title, not the labor. He liked invoices and branded pens, not foundations and roof beams. By the end, there was nothing left but debt and disappointment. Margaret, still clinging to the illusion of family success, began selling things quietly. A lamp here, a painting there. She claimed she was downsizing, but neighbors noticed. The flower beds were overgrown. The porch steps sagged. The house that once symbolized status now whispered decline. And through all of it, Alina remained absent as she had for over a decade. She didn't call. She didn't write. She didn't show up for holidays, and no one invited her. If Margaret spoke of her, it was only in vague terms. She's off somewhere, doing her own thing, as if Alina had drifted away like a cloud instead of being pushed out like a stain. But even from a distance, Alina heard the whispers. A former neighbor mentioned seeing Margaret at a pawn shop. A second cousin emailed to say Luke had been asking around for investors again. Then came the voicemail. She was sorting mail when her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail, as she often did. An hour later, curiosity got the better of her. Alina, the message began. The voice unmistakable. Luke, it's about Mom. She's not well. I think you should come. No greeting. No apology. Just those few words, and for the first time in years, the house she had locked away in her memory stirred again. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, that they had called, or that a part of her still reacted to it. She thought she buried that version of herself. The girl who cared, the daughter who wanted to be seen. She told herself she was only going to observe, not to reconnect, not to console. Just to see. 2 days later, she stood in front of the Whitmore house again. It looked smaller now, worn, the white paint peeled in long curls. The porch railing leaned like it was tired of standing. The air smelled like dust and wilting roses. She knocked. Luke answered the door. He looked older, not in years, but in spirit. Puffy eyes, unshaven, wearing sweatpants and a college hoodie that hadn't fit properly in a decade. Hey, he said, awkwardly. You came. I said I would, she replied, stepping past him. Inside, the house felt hollow. The furniture was all still there, but the soul was gone. Rooms echoed. The once polished floors were dulled with time and wear. The only thing that remained untouched was the guilt in the air. Margaret was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, thinner than Alina remembered. Her face, once sharp with judgment, looked fragile now. Her eyes flickered toward the doorway as Alina entered. "You cut your hair," Margaret said, her voice faint. Alina nodded. "You look older. It's been 12 years. Margaret didn't respond. She looked past Alina like she was a ghost who had walked through the wall. "What's wrong with her?" Alina asked Luke later once they were in the kitchen. "Doctor says it's a mix of things. Blood pressure, depression, maybe dementia setting in. She's not the same." Alina noticed the pill bottles stacked in a tray by the sink. "Some full, some empty. Why call me now?" she asked. Luke scratched his head. "Because you're her daughter." Alina laughed, not cruelly, just quietly. "Now I'm her daughter?" Luke flinched. "Look, I know we didn't treat you right. Things were said, jokes, but your family." Alina stared at him. "Family?" He looked down. "We're struggling, okay? I'm trying to keep it together, but it's all falling apart." There it was. The truth, finally. Not a call out of love. A call out of desperation. Alina left that night without saying much. She walked through her childhood room, now cluttered with Luke's moving boxes, and sat, for a while, in the only chair that hadn't been sold. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply observed. They had built their world without her now. They were watching it collapse without her too. And for the first time, she felt nothing but clarity. Some roots rot quietly from the inside out. And sometimes the best thing you can do is let the tree fall. The law office smelled like old leather and fresh ink, a place where things became official, final, irreversible. Alina sat in the far chair, closest to the window. She hadn't been invited, but she'd been expected. The letter from her father had led her to his attorney, Mr. Lowell, a precise man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. When he confirmed her identity, he didn't blink. He simply said, "It's time." Across from her, Margaret was already seated, wearing a pearl necklace and an air of entitlement. Luke slouched beside her, chewing on a thumbnail, a man both bored and irritated by anything he couldn't control. Neither had acknowledged Alina when she entered. Margaret was in full performance mode, the grieving widow in pressed wool and practiced sorrow. Such a difficult time for the family, she told Mr. Lowell with a tight smile. "But we're grateful to finally put the estate in order." Mr. Lowell nodded once, then turned to a thick envelope on his desk. Mr. Whitmore updated his will shortly before his passing. "This is the legally binding final version." Margaret tilted her head, amused. "I assume everything is divided between myself and Luke, as we previously discussed." Mr. Lowell cleared his throat. "Not quite." The room went still. Alina sat motionless, hands folded, expression unreadable. Mr. Lowell slipped on his glasses and began to read aloud. "I, Stanley Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Double quotes." Margaret sat straighter, waiting for the reward she believed she'd earned. "I leave my antique coin collection to my nephew, Thomas, in recognition of our shared interest in history." Margaret blinked. "I leave my golf clubs to my friend, Carl Simmons, who tolerated my terrible swing for 30 years. Luke shifted in his seat. "And to my daughter, Alina Whitmore. Double quotes now." Even the air seemed to stop. Mr. Lowell continued. I leave the full ownership of my home at 419 Hemlock Lane, the adjoining acre of land, all remaining bank accounts and investments, and the legal rights to any intellectual property or business patents under my name." Silence. Margaret's breath caught. "What?" she said, her voice a dry whisper. Luke stared at the lawyer, blinking like he'd misheard. Mr. Lowell looked up. "To reiterate, all material and financial assets are to be transferred to Alina Whitmore, effective immediately." This was signed, witnessed, and notarized 3 months before Mr. Whitmore's passing. "This has to be a mistake," Margaret muttered. Alina said nothing. Margaret turned sharply to Mr. Lowell. There's another version. The original will. It split everything between me and Luke. That's the one we agreed on. Mr. Lowell nodded calmly. That version was revoked. Luke leaned forward. You're saying we get nothing? The lawyer clasped his hands. Legally, yes, nothing. Margaret's face drained of color. Her lips trembled, but not with grief, with rage. She wasn't even around, she snapped, turning to Alina. She didn't visit. She didn't care. Stanley would never, but her voice cracked. Alina finally met her mother's eyes. No, he did. Margaret stood suddenly as if the ground had betrayed her. This is absurd. I was his wife. Alina's voice was steady. And I was his daughter. Luke sat frozen, caught between shock and resentment. His voice came out smaller than usual. What are we supposed to do? Mr. Lowell slid a set of papers across the desk. You're free to contest the will, but I'll warn you, it's ironclad. Every page was signed in front of witnesses. There's a video recording if you'd like to view it. Margaret's hand hovered over the papers, then pulled away. Alina stood slowly. Her chair made no sound. For years, she said quietly, you told me I wasn't one of you. That I was adopted. A stranger. An outsider. Margaret's eyes narrowed. It was just a joke, Alina smiled faintly. Then let me return the favor. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet, a prepared notice from her own attorney. What's this? Luke asked, confused. A 30-day notice, she replied. To vacate the property. Margaret staggered. You can't be serious. I am. You'd kick your own mother out of her house? Alina tilted her head. You kicked your daughter out of your life? Years ago. Mr. Lowell adjusted his glasses and glanced at the clock. Unless there's further business, I believe this concludes the reading. Margaret clutched her handbag, like it could anchor her to a world she no longer controlled. Luke muttered something under his breath, but it sounded like defeat as they stumbled out. Alina remained still, watching them go. No part of her felt triumphant. No satisfaction bubbled inside her. It wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. The girl they tried to erase had inherited everything they valued, and not because she asked for it, but because she had earned it in silence, in pain, in years spent alone building a life with no applause. The joke had come full circle. The outsider was now the owner. Margaret didn't go quietly. 3 days after the will reading, Alina received a certified letter from her mother's lawyer stating intent to contest the will. The letter was full of flowery language about emotional hardship, questionable influence, and a daughter's prolonged absence. Alina read it once, folded it neatly, and slid it into a drawer. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The law already had. But Luke came in person. He knocked on Alina's apartment door 2 days later, wearing the same sweatshirt. From the reading, only now with desperation hanging off him like a second skin. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. I just want to talk, he said, eyes darting. She crossed her arms. Talk then. He looked around the hallway as if expecting someone to jump out. Then he lowered his voice. I'm not here to fight. Mom's not well. She's losing it, you know? And I don't have anywhere to go. Alina said nothing. She raised you, he added. You really gonna throw her out like that? Alina tilted her head. Raise me? Is that what you call it? Luke shifted uncomfortably. Come on, Alina. Don't do this. You have everything now. The house, the accounts. Do you really need to kick us out? She studied him, not the brother she once knew, but the man he had become, entitled, aimless, still expecting someone else to clean up the mess. You said I wasn't one of you, she said softly. Remember? Maybe you were adopted. That line always made you laugh. Luke flushed. We didn't mean it like that, but you said it anyway. He rubbed his face. Please. I have nothing left. Alina paused, then reached behind the door and pulled out a plain envelope. Inside was the official 30-day notice. She held it out. Luke didn't take it at first. This isn't revenge, she said. It's reality. Actions have consequences. You taught me that, whether you meant to or not. Luke finally accepted the envelope, eyes glossing over the text. You've changed, he muttered. No, she replied. I just stopped pretending. He left without another word. The next week, Margaret called. Alina didn't recognize the number, but curiosity answered before caution could step in. I suppose you're proud of yourself. Her mother's voice snapped on the other end. Alina didn't respond. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? Alina blinked. Everything? A roof, food, clothes, and now you're taking the house your father and I built? You built a house, Alina said calmly. But you never built a home, not for me, Margaret scoffed. You're not a mother. You don't understand sacrifice. No, Alina said. But I understand silence and what it costs a child. There was a pause on the line, short but deep. Then Margaret spat. You're cold. Alina exhaled slowly. I learned from the best. She hung up. Exactly 30 days later, the Whitmore house sat empty. The shutters were closed, the driveway bare. The front porch creaked without footsteps. Margaret and Luke had left without a goodbye, without a note, without a trace. Alina stood on the sidewalk, deed in hand, keys in pocket. For years, they told her she didn't belong, that she wasn't truly family, that she wasn't one of them. Now she was the only one left standing on the front lawn. She didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She simply stepped forward, unlocked the door, and walked into the house that once rejected her. Not as a guest, but as its rightful owner. Most people would have sold the house. It held too many shadows, too many ghosts. The walls had soaked in years of silence, and the floorboards creaked with memories no one asked for. But Alina didn't put it on the market. She didn't call an agent or slap a for sale sign in the yard. Instead, she picked up a hammer. She started with the front door, the same door she'd once walked through with her heart in her throat, hoping to be seen. Now, it groaned open under her hand like it had been waiting for her return. The entryway smelled of dust and wood polish, and something older, something stale. She opened every window. Let the wind in. Let the old air out. It was the first breath the house had taken in years. Alina didn't rush. She took her time. Each morning, she made a list. One task at a time. One wall, one corner. One broken piece of the past to strip away, sand down, or paint over. The kitchen cabinets still had the labels Margaret used. Spices, snacks, essentials. Alina peeled them off, one by one. Underneath the sticky residue, the wood felt lighter somehow. Cleaner. In the dining room, the stage for so many cold dinners. And cruel jabs. She pulled up the carpet. Underneath was hardwood, scuffed and weathered, but solid. She scrubbed it clean and laid a new rug down, soft, deep blue, the color of still water. That room became a library. She lined the walls with bookshelves, filled them with stories about survival, resilience, quiet rebellion. She added an armchair by the window, a reading lamp that cast a warm glow at night, and a framed quote above the mantel. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. Then she tackled her old bedroom. It was still painted the same pale pink Margaret had insisted on when Alina was 10, because that's what girls like. She never liked it. It made her feel like a character someone else had written. She painted over it with a cool sage green, the color of fresh starts. She turned the closet into storage for manuscripts and journals. The dresser drawers now held notebooks, pens, stacks of drafts. She bought a desk, sturdy, simple, and placed it under the window where sunlight spilled across the floor each morning. It became her writing studio. A room that once stifled her voice now became the place she used it, she didn't document the process. No before and after pictures. No blog. No social media reveal. This wasn't for anyone else. This was for her. Every nail she hammered and felt like a reclaiming. Every stroke of paint a quiet act of defiance. Not against them, but against the version of herself that once believed she wasn't worthy of space. The hallway still echoed sometimes. She'd walk past Luke's old room and remember laughter used to erupt from behind that door, always at her expense. She didn't step inside. She closed that door and left it shut. Not every room needed to be reopened. She turned the upstairs guest room into a meditation space. White walls, soft cushions, a shelf with candles, and a small speaker for music that soothed more than stirred. The backyard was wild with weeds, but she didn't tame it all. She let the wildflowers bloom where they wanted. She planted a single tree in the corner, a Japanese maple. Small, strong, slow-growing. Like her at night, she'd sit on the porch, the same porch she'd once cleaned for Margaret without thanks, and sip tea in silence. No one demanded anything from her. No one told her to smile. No one mocked the way she breathed, and for the first time, the silence was not empty. It was sacred. A few neighbors passed by, curious. One or two asked if she planned to flip the house or rent it out. She smiled and said no. They didn't press that inside. She found old papers in drawers, bills, letters, notes from decades ago. Some she threw away, some she kept. But none of it held power over her anymore. She was no longer the girl waiting at the dinner table, trying to earn a place. She had inherited the whole table, and she had decided what stayed, what changed, and what no longer served her. Some people think revenge is loud, explosive, final, but Alina's wasn't. Her revenge was restoration. It was brushing years of dust off of memory and seeing what was still standing underneath. It was making the walls hers. The heir hers. The name on the deed hers. And in doing so, she didn't rewrite the past. She renovated it. The house was quiet, not the kind of silence that once made Alina feel invisible, but a stillness that soothed her now. Like a soft hand resting on the shoulder of her spirit. It was nearly dusk. The kind of blue light that blurred edges and made everything feel softer. Alina walked slowly through the living room, fingers grazing the back of the sofa, the corners of the bookcase, the grooves in the mantel that once held nothing but dust. Tonight, she carried something fragile in her hand, the letter, the one her Aunt Rosemary had brought her. The one that had changed something deep inside her without needing to say much at all. It had taken her weeks to decide what to do with it. Part of her wanted to keep it hidden, folded away in the back of a drawer, protected from light and air and time. Another part of her, the part that had gone unheard for most of her life, wanted it visible, present, a quiet monument to what had almost been left unsaid. She chose a frame made of walnut wood, not flashy, but strong. Something simple, something real. Just like the words on the page, she placed the letter inside carefully, smoothing out the creases and cleaned the glass until it gleamed. Then she set it on the mantel, center, upright, where the flames from the fireplace flickered beneath it like a heartbeat. There it was. Alina, you were always stronger than I gave you credit for ... She read it again, not because she needed to remember, but because it felt good to see it there, tangible, named. For years, she had chased a single sentence, one line, one phrase from her father that said, I saw you, and now there it was, framed, centered, sacred. She stepped back, hands clasped together, and breathed in deeply. There was no audience, no applause, no one to witness this moment but the walls that had once heard every insult and absorbed every silence. And yet, this moment felt bigger than all of that. Because she wasn't smiling in victory. She was smiling in knowing, for so long, She had wondered if maybe they were right, if maybe she was the outsider, the one who didn't fit, didn't belong, didn't earn her place. But that letter told the truth she had always carried in her chest like a secret no one believed. She had been there the whole time, shining even when they refused to see the light. She sat down in the armchair near the fire, her favorite chair now, the one she'd reupholstered herself, and let the warmth wrap around her Dot. There was no bitterness in her. No need to rehash what had been done. She didn't replay the moments anymore, not the cruel jokes, not the favoritism, not the indifference, because now she knew. It had never been about her worth, Dot. It had always been about their blindness. Her father's failure wasn't in his silence alone. It was in not being able to confront the mirror she held up to him. Her quiet strength, her stillness, her refusal to shrink just to make others comfortable. But in the end, he had written the words, maybe too late to be spoken, but not too late to be known. She thought of Margaret sometimes, of course. Wondered where she'd gone, what story she was telling herself now. Maybe that Alina had stolen something. Maybe that she'd been tricked. Margaret was always better at rewriting reality than living in it. Dot. As for Luke, he had vanished too. Left no forwarding address. Not even a phone call. She didn't chase him. She no longer needed a relationship built on guilt or manipulation. The truth was, letting them go was the first real gift she'd ever given herself. And this house, once a place of cold dinners and colder glances, was now her sanctuary. Each wall painted by her hand. Each book on the shelf chosen with care. Each room holding peace. The letter on the mantel wasn't about inheritance or apology. It wasn't about what she'd gained. It was about what she'd never needed in the first place. Permission to exist. She'd always belonged, not because of their recognition, but in spite of their rejection. She was never the outsider. They had simply chosen not to see her. Dot. And now, finally, she had nothing left to prove. Dot. No more doors to knock on. No more tables to sit at with a bowed head. She was the table. She was the foundation. And the letter, well, it was no longer a lifeline. Dot. It was just a reminder that she had won something far greater than money, land, or even the house itself. She had won herself back. The house feels different now. Not because the furniture is new, or the floors have been refinished, or the walls repainted, though all of that is true. No, it feels different because it breathes. There's laughter in the halls, the kind that starts small from the belly and grows until it fills a room. There are voices, young, unsure, bold, reading aloud their words, their truths, their pain, and their power. There are notebooks stacked on tables, pens tucked behind ears, blank pages slowly turning into declarations. Alina walks through the home like a gardener checking her blooms. She pauses outside what used to be Luke's bedroom, now a shared dormitory space for girls who need a place to land. The bunk beds are covered in mismatched quilts. A string of fairy lights runs across the ceiling. Someone's taped up a quote near the door that reads, "You do not owe your story to the ones who hurt you, but you can offer it to those who need it." It's the kind of house she once wished for, not big or fancy, but warm, open, safe. After inheriting everything, Alina could have walked away. She could have sold the place, changed her name, vanished into a city where no one knew the history she carried, but she did and single quotes T. Instead, she stayed. She chose to plant something new in the soil that once tried to bury her. She founded the Whitmore Writing Retreat, a seasonal haven for young women estranged from their families. Some come from foster care, others from homes like hers, filled with rules and silence but no love. Here, they gather. They write stories that were never welcomed at their dinner tables. They cry, they heal, they begin again. And Alina? She guides. She doesn't lead from the front or lecture from a pedestal. She sits beside them, notebook in hand, and asks questions like, What would you say if no one interrupted you? Or what would you write if no one ever read it? The girls adore her. Not because she's perfect, but because she's real. Because her quiet speaks louder than anyone else's shouting ever did. Sometimes visitors from the town stop by. Curious people who remember the old Whitmores, Stanley and Margaret, Luke and the family business that collapsed like a house of cards. Is this their house? They ask, glancing at the door, at the freshly painted porch swing. The mailbox with Alina Whitmore written in gold lettering. She always smiles politely. It was their house, she says. Now it's my home. There's no bitterness in her voice. Just truth, because she's not living in their shadow anymore. She's living in her own light. The name Whitmore used to sting. It felt like a chain wrapped tight around her identity, something she couldn't escape no matter how far she moved. It was the name tied to every insult, every cold shoulder, every joke that tried to shrink her. But now it means something else entirely. Now it means survival, growth, change. Now it's the name behind a sanctuary dot and in the quiet moments. When the girls are writing by candlelight or laughter echoes from the kitchen, Alina sometimes pauses and looks at the mantle. The letter is still there, framed, untouched. Doesn't reread it much anymore. She doesn't need to, but she keeps it where others can see. Because it's a reminder, not of who her father was, but of who she became despite him. There's a power in reclaiming something that was meant to hurt you. Once, they used adopted like a wound. A word meant to make her feel like she didn't belong. But now, she thinks of it as a blessing, because not belonging in their world gave her permission to create her own. One evening, a girl named Kiara, 15, sharp-tongued and soft-hearted, asked her, "Do you ever wish they'd been different? Your parents?" Alina thought for a moment, stirring her tea. "Sometimes," she said. "But then I remember, if they were different, I might never have become who I am now." Kiara nodded, scribbled something into her notebook, and whispered, "That's deep." Alina smiled. The house, once a place of exile, now held belonging. The family name, once a banner of cruelty, now sheltered the wounded. And the story, once a painful secret, had turned into a living legacy. She didn't just rewrite her life. She rewrote the meaning of everything they thought they defined. And she did it quietly, deliberately, like a true author.